Alien, yeah, that is the name of the archetype, but one of my favorites in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game. Introduced all the way back in Power of the Duelist, they're known for looking really cool and playing really bad. Now, I don't want to say they're absolutely terrible, they're a very fun deck, and I find some success in Edison format. However, the problem all comes down to the thematic gameplay. The thing that I love most about Yu-Gi-Oh is that they're able to make every deck feel so different in a way that aligns with their theme. So alien monsters utilize counters. By placing 8 counters across the board, you're meant to infect your opponent's monsters and either weaken them or take control of them, or even better, just straight out destroy them. However, the way that they're utilized in Aliens isn't really the best. No, I'm not saying that counters are a bad mechanic in Yu-Gi-Oh, but we don't really see it too often. The one place you'll probably recognize them from is spellcasters that utilize spell counters. The thing is that spellcasters usually have a unified and efficient way of utilizing the counters. Most of them have a continuous effect that allows you to place a spell counter on them when you activate a spell card. Then they all use the spell counters that are on them as a resource, gaining additional continuous effects if they have a certain amount on them, or having ignition and trigger effects that require you to remove spell counters in order to activate them. It is all a very efficient system, as you may know from Royal Magical Library. However, when it comes to aliens, they aren't as unified, because depending on the alien monster, they're actually going to have a different effect. Some of them have the effects that allow you to place A counters on the field, some of them have continuous effects that give the A counters something to do, usually being that they reduce the attack and defense of a monster with an A counter on it, and then there are some other cards that require you to remove those A counters in order to activate their effect. And because they have different uses, normally the deck is built in a way that wants you to place the A counters on your opponent's monsters, which can be really cool if you give them some negative effects, but it creates two different problems. You're either giving your opponent control of your A counters, aka your resource, or you're placing it on a monster that you yourself will eventually get rid of and destroy because it's in your way. So as you can see, the alien archetype is inherently just kinda built wrong, but that doesn't stop me from loving them. For the most part, in the early waves, we saw a bunch of weird little guys and a handful of big guys, their first boss monster effectively being Alien Mother, and even though it is colored bright white, it is very likely a reference to the Alien movies. And this one brings in the other interesting thematic effect of basically infecting your opponent's monsters with A counters in order to take control of them. But one of the other early boss monsters, Alien Overlord, was sort of in conflict with the deck. Sure, it allows you to easily special summon itself, but again it requires you to remove A counters off of the field, very likely from your opponent's monsters. Though I will say I really do love the look and the theming of everything, having a bunch of very different body types, but still sorta having some unifying design elements. Of course, every alien monster is a reptile type, and most of them are light attribute. Not all of them are, there are a few elemental specific ones, but for the most part they all just are light. Very interesting, these were some elements that they would also share with the worm archetype that we got in Duel Terminal, which was also made up of a bunch of extraterrestrials. Though the worm monsters are a lot more ugly. Get it? Because one of them is called Worm Ugly? Anyway, back to Aliens proper. The ones I find really weird are some later additions, those being Alien Kid and Alien Dog. I assume that these were meant to sort of riff off of Alien Mother, but their designs and concepts are a bit too goofy for me, even though they both are actually really good. Alien Kid is a great way to spread A counters on your opponent's monsters, and Alien Dog is some great special summoning support that also spreads A counters. But with the final main deck monster being Cosmic Horror Yugioh, that once again goes back to the idea of controlling your opponent's monsters. It sort of set up the idea of what a boss monster in Aliens is gonna look like, this giant cosmic horror monster. It wasn't until we were solidly in the 5Ds era when the alien monsters got a tuner and a synchro monster that would really give the deck some power. Alien Ammonite is one of my personal favorites, he's such a funny little guy, being a level 1 tuner that can special summon a monster from the graveyard, giving you the perfect material to synchro summon for Cosmic Fortress Golgar. A lower level synchro monster with some really decent attack points, combining two really good effects. One that allows you to easily spread A counters, and then another that allows you to destroy a card by removing 2. Basically, you're meant to utilize this with some of the continuous spells that the deck has access to, and overall, like I said, yeah, it kind of is a beast in Edison format. And this is one of my favorite monsters that does kind of give the deck a bit of a purpose and tie it all together. I know I used to have one as a kid when I tried playing Aliens, but I have no idea what happened to it. Which is a real shame because it has only ever been printed once all the way back in 2009, making it relatively pricey, at least in terms of old Yu-Gi-Oh cards, which would normally be brought down if it got reprints, or the reprints themselves would be lower price. But for some reason, yeah, they just haven't. I have no idea why. The thing is though, that was basically the strategy that the deck would stick with for years, aside from some other very helpful reptile support in the future. Really what I think makes the old version of Aliens are some of these spells and traps that they have access to. Okay, sure, they have a bunch of other, I'm gonna be honest, bad cards that are in the deck, a lot of them that are very thematic, but overall most of them are just too slow or require too high of a cost, Mysterious Triangle goes kinda crazy. You destroy one monster in the field without an A counter, and then you special summon a level 4 or lower alien monster from your deck. And the monster that you destroy doesn't even really have to be one on your field. So basically, if you're in a situation if your opponent has a monster with no A counters, which is gonna be pretty easy because you control where they go, this card is just straight up removal, and then it gives you a free monster from your own deck. And then there is Planet Pollutant Virus, and the name really does relate it to other virus cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! You tribute an alien monster and destroy all face-up monsters your opponent controls without A counters, and then for 3 turns after, your opponent's monsters will always get an A counter that they summon. So yeah, this one is just some insane removal that also sets up basically the rest of your deck. Though as I was saying, it wasn't until a relatively small wave in the future that we got some new cards to play with. Alien Stealth Buster is a monster that places A counters when it's sent to the graveyard, and then banishing it from the graveyard can destroy a monster with an A counter on it, while a Cell Recombination device allows you to send alien monsters from your deck to the graveyard in order to place A counters as well, and then on top of that you can banish it to search for an alien monster. The 2 main deck cards they gave it are actually good and accomplish the main idea of the deck, that being placing counters, while also giving you some access to destruction and some searching power. These aren't like overly busted, but they just give the deck a lot more to work with. The big thing though is that they actually got 2 Link monsters. Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame is a Link 2 monster that can place even more A counters on the field, and if it is destroyed it can replace itself relatively easily. But then we get our next little boss monster, Cosmic Slicer Zerol, and honestly I think this one is really good. Again, you're gonna have to deal with the handicap of playing this in aliens and you need to use only reptile monsters to make it, but the way that they decided to make aliens good is to just give them a Bagooska, while also actually utilizing the A counters that you would have on the field. And with just how well all of the other new cards allow you to place those A counters, they still even add in a second effect where you get to remove 2 A counters to get an additional normal summon, potentially going into an alien Ammonite that would potentially make you a Cosmic Fortress Golgar. So on paper all of this seems really great, but they still have such a long way to go. I am really hoping that we get to see even more of the aliens in the future, and that we get to see a little bit more of their lore connection. There isn't really all that much that we can identify here, but generally you can get an idea of the hierarchy that they have going on. Obviously all of the small guys are just sort of regular citizens, most of the level 4s are different types of warriors, Alien Mother and Alien Overlord are some of the higher ups in charge, and then the ones that are basically the rulers are all the cosmic monsters, which have designs that are just out of this world. Though you know I will say I would really love to see a little bit more of their society, which like I said was sort of established by things like Alien Kid and Alien Dog, but then there's also things like the artwork of a Cell Recombination device, which was a recent card, which gives you a look at who's actually utilizing the devices that we had seen in other cards, and basically the ones who are developing the A cells and the Planet Pollutant Virus, those being a bunch of alien greys in lab coats. An alien grey just might be one of the most utilized. Well, we only see it in a few cards here and there, but I assume that this is sort of just the general alien. In all honesty, I think there is so much more room to expand the lore in other cards that we would get in the future. Like straight up, sure, I know we talked a bit about the hierarchy that we can kind of see in the card design, but I think that we should have like one definitive ruler over all the aliens. And to be really funny, it should just be a bigger version of Alien Grey. But I guess that is sort of all for today, talking about the alien monsters. I definitely didn't go into every single card, and this isn't like a definitive history. Sort of just a lot of my personal thoughts on the deck, as it is one I've been playing for a while, maybe not physically all of the time, but these are a bunch of monster cards that fascinated me so much when I was a child, and more recently exploring Edison format, it's become one of my favorite decks in there. I don't know, I thought it was a really fun way to enjoy Alien Week, which by the way is going on over on the main channel as we're talking about some alien Pokemon, but of course it does spread over here for at least one video, maybe 2, who knows? So if you would like to hear me talk a bit more about some of the other extraterrestrial stuff in Yu-Gi-Oh, leave a comment below. If you enjoyed watching, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and hype up the video to show your support. But anyway, for now, this is GatorX, and I will catch you all later.